Hi, David here. In my last video, I talked about this preacher who said the craziest thing I think any preacher said about the coronavirus epidemic, or, well, beyond epidemic, it's pandemic now, right? And believe me, there are a few who set the bar really high. But the craziest thing was he said God woke him up at 2:30 in the morning to tell him what is behind the coronavirus. Okay, I don't think we need God to tell us what's behind it. What's behind the coronavirus? A virus. But, okay, so God wakes him up. Does God have anything new to tell him that might help us? Well, according to him, what's behind it is fear and Satan. Now, I'm not going to get into an argument about, whether Satan started this virus or whether it was God as punishment for sins. You could, if you wanted to, make the argument either way from the Bible. It's kind of ambiguous as to what God's role or Satan's role is in putting out diseases. But here's one thing. Before you go there, remember this. A virus is not spiritual. It's natural. It spreads through natural means, human-to-human contact. It doesn't need a demon or a devil. It has a life of its own. It's a living organism. It seeks to survive just like any other living organism. And it does that by finding human hosts. And the problem is, when one of us becomes a host for it, we get sick. It's just trying to survive, but so are we. And, I'd say to any virus, if it's between you and me, I'm fighting for me, not you. But he really stressed that what a problem fear is in this, to the point that it's like he's saying, all we have to do is stop being afraid of it and the virus will go away. There's a time to talk about fear being a main problem. There are a number of things that spread through fear. Things like racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia. Those spread through fear, and those gain strength through fear. A virus gets strength and spreads through human-to-human contact. It doesn't matter if you're afraid of it or not, if you're exposed to it. And it's contagious enough, and you don't have the antibodies to fight it off, you're going to catch it, and you're going to get sick from it. That's how viruses work. That's how they survive. But it's fear. So just tell all these nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals who are treating people with coronavirus, you don't need PPE, you just need to stop being afraid and you won't catch it. Like I said, this is the craziest thing I heard. But God woke him up at 2:30 in the morning to tell him this. The problem is fear, not the virus. It spreads through fear, not through human-to-human contact. Do you know what a virus is? I mean, this is the problem when you have people commenting out of their area of expertise. If your expertise is the Bible, great. Talk about the Bible. If your expertise is great medicine, talk about medicine. But don't mix the two up. So, of course, he had to give some scriptural representation for it. The statement. Yeah, the statement that gets it going. He compared it to Daniel chapter 3. This is the story where King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon sets up a golden image, 90 feet high, and wants everyone to worship. And he says, with the coronavirus, Satan has set up an image, and he wants you to worship it. That's what God got him up at 5:30, 2:30 in the morning, or whatever, to tell him. Whatever woke you up and told you that, it was not God, okay? God knows how a virus is spread, even if you don't. And another thing, God knows how to read the Bible in context, even if you don't. When you read Daniel 3 in context, it has nothing to do with the coronavirus. I'm going to prove it to you. We're going to go into Daniel chapter 3. I'm going to show you what it means in context, and then we're going to compare it to our situation now with the coronavirus. They are nothing alike. Okay? Now, sorry for spoiling the end for you, but I don't know if you're going to stick around, how long you're going to stick around, so I want you to get that before you leave. So, Daniel chapter 3. Now, I would like to show you my computer screen now, but I tried 2 different programs, neither of which worked. One of them, it's called S1E2-Why. I recorded something on it, and I got a message that said, can't play file, because apparently it doesn't work on Windows 10. It'll work on Windows Vista 7 or 8, but not Windows 10. I guess the company went out of business before Windows 10 came out. Wish I'd known that before I downloaded it. Then I tried Cam Studio, which is supposed to be a reputable program. I recorded something. Then I tried to stop recording, and my computer screen started blinking on and off like a strobe light. So obviously, that's not working either. So, sorry, I can't show you my computer screen, but I've got Daniel chapter 3 pulled up in a really cool software package that I can look at several different translations at once, and I can look at analysis windows and cross-references and all, and I can look at Greek text and Hebrew text. This particular passage, though, most of the Old Testament was written originally in Hebrew. This particular section of Daniel was written originally in Aramaic, and so it barely made it into the Hebrew Bible, but I guess they made this rule that said, you know, it had to be written originally in either Hebrew or Aramaic. If it weren't for that or Aramaic, we'd be missing a good section of Daniel. But anyway, I'm going to read from the King James Version because that's what he did, and, you know, I want to be sure when I'm comparing what he said with what the text says that we're reading from the same translation. The story is pretty famous if you grew up in church. The Jews have been conquered by Babylon. The city of Jerusalem was destroyed along with the temple, and They took the best and brightest of the people and brought them into exile to serve the king in Babylon. Among them were Daniel and 3 of his friends called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're there in exile, living in Babylon, and throughout the book of Daniel, he and his friends bump up against certain regulations and rules and worship in Babylon that they have a hard time going along with, and they get in trouble because of it. But God always delivers them out of trouble. That's generally how the book of Daniel goes, and that's how this story goes. We're going to read the first 6 verses just to, all right, well, maybe before that, no. We'll read the first 6 verses, and then I'll tell you the gist of the rest of the story, and then we'll go through and compare his analysis with what it really says. What do the scriptures say? How do you read? These were the questions Jesus posed to the Pharisees. And for most people, the only question they ask is, what do the scriptures say? But that second question, how do you read, is just as important. And I can tell you the way he read it proves he did not hear from God. I don't know what it was that woke him up at 2:30 in the morning. Maybe that jambalaya was too spicy and he had got gas. Maybe. Maybe. A misinterpretation, misappropriation of scripture. Could it be Satan? Hopefully you're old enough to remember, or you've seen on replays or YouTube of Saturday Night Live, you remember the church lady. That was my attempt to impersonate that. It seemed appropriate for the moment. Okay, so Daniel chapter 3, starting with verse 1. I'm going to read through verse 6 to get started. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 80 cubits and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. Okay, that would be about 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, because a cubit is about 1.5 feet. So 60 cubits works out to about 90 feet. 6 cubits works out to about 9 feet. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Here's a little historical note. It might have been an obelisk from the description. My study Bible note says giant colossi, or colossuses, that's the plural, were widely used freestanding art forms in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Diodorus Siculus, 1st century BC, and Herodotus, 5th century BC, report a gold statue of Zeus, or Bel, in Babylon. See Isaiah 40, verse 19, Jeremiah 10, verses 3 through 10. So apparently Isaiah and Jeremiah also have something to say about the gold image in Babylon. And it says it's obelisk-shaped. The proportions reflect the Babylonian sexagesmal number system. They liked to put things in groups of 60. So 60 cubits high. You know how there's 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour? That comes from Babylonian influence. They liked to do things in groups of 60. 1/10 of 60 would be 6, so 6 cubits broad. Just a little setting the scene for you. Okay, so he set up this statue of Bel, who is the Babylonian equivalent of Jupiter. Now continuing, and it's in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon, now continuing with verse 2. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together, that's a little tongue twister, the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music." Okay, that was a list of musical instruments there. Not sure what the sackbut is. That's a funny, I guess, a King James name for an instrument. "Ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up." Okay, so he's saying, you hear this music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Okay, this is a pretty rough situation. Now, I wish I could have shown you the text, but like I say, my attempt at screen recording, ended in disaster. Okay, but here's what we need to notice. Now, according to this guy, in the same way Nebuchadnezzar set up a golden image and told everyone to worship it, Satan has set up an image and wants you to worship it. What's the image of? Coronavirus? Fear? He wasn't really clear on that. If Satan has set up an image, where is it? In this passage, there is a clear image, and there is a clear place where it is located. It's located in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Anyone going to the province, to the plain of Dura, could see it. I mean, this was a gold statue 90 feet high. How could you miss that? Anyone could see it. It must have been impressive to look at, when you think about it. A 90-foot gold statue? Man, it would have been impressive. But, the Jews were forbidden from worshiping images. So, as we go into the story, we're going to find out Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not going to go along with it. They're going to refuse to worship the image. And King Nebuchadnezzar is going to get so angry that he orders the fiery furnace to be stoked 7 times hotter than normal. I don't even know if that's possible, but he really wants them burned. And the fire is so hot that the guards who are charged with throwing them in the fiery furnace get burned themselves. But somehow, Nebuchadnezzar is able to look into the fiery furnace and see the 3 Hebrew boys are not burned. They're not harmed at all. They're right in the middle of this super hot fire. and it's not burning them at all. They're not even hurt by the smoke. They can breathe normally. Now here's the twist. Nebuchadnezzar says, weren't there 3 Jewish boys thrown into the furnace? And I see 4 people in there. And that 4th one looks like the Son of God. So, what was this 4th figure? We're not told exactly who it is. Could be an angel, could be the mysterious figure called the angel of the Lord, who sometimes appeared to the Israelites in old times. But we know that this figure represents God. God is with them in the fire, and they are not burned. So Nebuchadnezzar orders them to come out of the fire, and no harm has come to them at all. Their hair and their eyebrows aren't even singed. They got no harm from breathing smoke. They're breathing just fine. They don't have to cough the smoke out. In fact, they don't even have a smell of smoke on them. That's how complete God's deliverance was. And Nebuchadnezzar, in his, after sees this, he is amazed, of course, and he immediately converts to worship the God of Israel, and he sends out a decree, whereas before he said, anyone who does not worship this image I set up is going to be thrown into a fiery furnace. And we skip ahead to verse 29. Therefore, I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that utters blasphemy against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, pretty amazing story, wasn't it? It was the kind of story that the Jews told over the years to encourage everyone to remain true to their faith and true to their heritage when they are under the rule of foreign kings who want to make them forget their Jewish ways. And stories like this, the stories in Daniel all seem to follow that pattern. A king makes a declaration that the Jews cannot abide, whether it's worshiping an image or working on the Sabbath or, whatever. They just cannot abide and stay true to their religion. Those who stay true to their religion are delivered from harm, from the harm that these kings threaten them with. And usually when the king, also it's a common feature of Daniel, when the king sees these things happen, he repents, he believes in the God of Daniel and his people, and he grants special favors to them. He orders that they be allowed to worship God anywhere in the empire. Okay, we don't see that happening very much today. Usually people get thrown into a fire, no matter how faithful they are, they burn. And there was a genre of martyrdom stories that rose in Christianity that came not from being delivered from the fire, but from willingly submitting to the punishment of the government and accepting suffering and torture and death in the name of their faith. So, when I read these stories like this, I'll admit I take them with a grain of salt, that I don't expect God to, if someone's going to throw me in a fire for being a Christian, I don't expect God to deliver me from it. I expect to burn, and I'm happy to do that. Well, maybe not happy, but I'll do it if I have to. But now, let's look at this, what Nebuchadnezzar said and did, and compare that with what's the government in the U.S. is doing now, or trying to do. He said Satan set up an image and wants you to worship it, but there is no image anywhere, and there is no order to worship the coronavirus. The government did not order anyone to worship the coronavirus. No one is worshiping the coronavirus, not in the U.S. or anywhere in the world. There is no image of the coronavirus that we are supposed to bow down to. And if there was, no one is bowing down to it. Where is the image? If you didn't bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's image, what would the image do to you? Nothing. The king would have thrown you into a fiery furnace, but the image itself could do nothing. It had no life of its own. It had no power of its own. The only power it had was what people gave it through belief, superstition, law, or fear. Does the coronavirus have life and power of its own? Yes, it does. That's why so far over 800,000 people have gotten sick and over 40,000 people have died in the U.S. alone so far. A virus of any kind is a living organism, much simpler than a human organism, but it does have life of its own. It doesn't need government to give it power. It has power of its own to make you sick or kill you, no matter what the government or you say about it. That's an important point, because that is how you know it is not an idol. If you did not worship the Nebuchadnezzar's image, what was the punishment? Death in a fiery furnace. That is persecution. If you don't follow the rules of social distancing today, what is the punishment? If you're caught, you might get a warning and a fine. If you are a repeat offender, they might put you in jail, though they'd probably rather not, since social distancing in a prison is already a challenge. No government official is handing out the death penalty for social distancing violations. That is not persecution. That is protecting the public health and promoting the general welfare, things the government is supposed to do. Who or what would kill you in Daniel's time if you failed to worship the idol? The government. Who or what will kill you if you catch the coronavirus? The virus will make you sick and maybe kill you. If you have to go to the hospital, you'd better pray they have enough ventilators. Whatever the virus does to you, it's all because of the virus. The government has nothing to do with it. So now, do you see there is no comparison between the golden image of Daniel chapter 3 and the coronavirus? Yeah. What to say at this point, I don't know. I hope I've convinced you, because this is really dangerous, the kind of rhetoric this particular preacher and others like him are putting out there. There are times when it is appropriate for the people of God to defy government orders. This is not one of them. If you want the virus to go away, stick to the rules of social distancing. Stay at least 6 feet apart from anyone you encounter out there. Stay home as much as possible. Telework if you can. Do classes online. Do conferences online. Do events online as much as you can. If you do have to go out, wear PPE if it's appropriate. Wash your hands. Sanitize surfaces that you touch. That's what will make it go away. It doesn't matter if you're afraid of it or not. Fear doesn't spread it. Human-to-human contact does, and that's why we need to limit it as much as possible. And as much of a pain in the butt as that is, we have to do it. It's the only way this will go away. So, you see now what a difference it makes when you read in context. You may like his reading better, you know. It may feel good to think that, oh, well, I won't catch the virus because I'm a Christian. I won't catch the virus because I prayed. I won't catch the virus because God will put some invisible bubble around me to keep the virus away, and I won't catch it and I won't spread it because I'm faithful and I pray the right prayers and I believe the right things. And I'm not afraid. Perfect love casts out fear. Yes, but it doesn't cast out common sense. Which actually reminds me of another, more appropriate scripture for what this guy is talking about. For what, for this coronavirus and how people of faith should handle it. I can think of another scripture that's more appropriate for this situation than Daniel chapter 3. And I'll talk about that in another video. But for now, I pray you stay safe. And don't believe the false prophets saying peace, peace when there is no peace. We are in a pandemic. Understand what that means. Grace and peace to you.